I am Tina Marie J. Welcome to the channel. Super excited that you guys decided to join. I'm excited for this podcast because we don't have someone from the ICOC or from the ICC. We have someone who is in an apostolic church. I honestly have no idea what that even is, and I'm excited to hear about the experience of this one former member. So welcome, Beautiful Bean. This is actually her YouTube channel name. So at the end of this video, make sure you check in the links down below in the description box. So welcome.
Thank you.
So I'm really curious because I have no idea what that even is, apostolic church.
So it's more like a doctrine. They go by apostolic or Pentecostal or full gospel, and it's where they believe that you should be baptized in the name of Jesus only, and that also you should speak in tongues as the Spirit gives you utterance. So that's what they believe in. That's the doctrine.
So it's very similar to the ICOC. Like you have to be baptized in order to get into heaven.
Yes.
How long were you a part of this?
Technically, I was kind of raised in it, but we didn't become big in it until I was 12 years old. So from from 12, that's when I became really enthralled in that church.
Is this church located everywhere, or is there just a few locations planted?
Well, actually, there's a lot of apostolic churches. They go by different names. You might see there's a St. Mark that's actually apostolic, or you might see not Light of the World. What's another one? Church of God or something like that, and it might be a little bit apostolic. It's really interesting because there's a lot of churches that go by the doctrine, but they don't call themselves apostolic, and then there are some who do call themselves apostolic.
Okay, that's interesting because I just Googled it, and it says that it came from the Pentecostal movement. It follows the teachings of the 12 apostles who followed Christ. So, what else do they teach you other than the fact that they believe that you have to get into heaven? What else is a part of their doctrine?
So another big part of it is, like I said, the whole speaking in tongues thing is a very crucial, important part. That also comes with what they call shouting or praising, and tithe and offerings, and being taught about different things about marriage. So it has a lot of different components to it that they teach you about.
What do they believe when it comes to marriage?
So when it comes to marriage, they believe that it should only be with another believer. And it's very interesting because a believer to them is not another Christian. A believer is another apostolic person. So it's not good to just be with somebody who's like a Baptist or somebody who was, from the, I believe it's the ICC, right?
Right.
Yeah. Or any other kind of Christianity. They don't believe in that. They only believe in you being married to somebody who is apostolic or Pentecostal.
And what if a person is dating someone who's not apostolic? What happens? Is there any do they receive any backlash for that, or do they have to repent for some sin?
You definitely receive backlash for sure. When I was in high school, I had one boyfriend, and that boyfriend, he was, his grandfather was a Baptist preacher, right? But he was basically Baptist. And so I remember one of the youth leaders telling me that I was in the wrong for dating this boy. I needed to break up. This was not godly. This was not what God wanted, and that this needed to end.
And what happened after that?
I ended it because I truly believed, what she told me. So.
Right. And what about when it comes to friends? Are they allowed to have friends that are outside of the religion or outside of the denomination?
So technically, you're allowed to have friends, but it's still kind of like looked at as that you're being friends with the world, and to be friends with the world is to be an enemy of God. So for you to be friends with somebody who does not have the same apostolic values, it's like, oh, you're kind of hanging out with sinners, and I don't think that's what God would want you to do.
Wow. That's very similar to the ICOC. They would say the same thing. They would say that you're enemies with God if you're friends with the world.
Exactly.
And how do they handle people who come into the religion already married, where one spouse is what I like to call a heavy duty Christian and ready and excited, but then the other spouse is maybe a different religion or maybe just doesn't subscribe to religion at all? How do they handle those kind of relationships?
So with those kind of marriages, they kind of tell them that like you should still just be a good wife or just be a good husband, and that hopefully God will touch your spouse's heart and draw them to himself, and they'll start coming to church. I even heard a story once. The pastor was preaching over the pulpit, and he said when he was a kid there was this lady and her husband was not quote unquote saved, and he would get like really upset that she was at the church like all the time. So he would come in and like drag her out by her hair, right? So he said, that lady just kept praying for her husband. And like years down the road, like 5 to 10 years down the road, that man came in the church and like got baptized, and he started coming to church, and God changed his heart. And so that's how they think about it, is like, well, just stay and, pray that God touches their heart, and hopefully God will change them soon.
And so when they say this, what they really mean is pray that God touches their heart and makes them believe what we believe specifically. Like they can't be a part
Exactly.
of any kind of Christian church. It has to be this specific church.
Exactly.
So you said you were raised in this church, correct?
From 12 years old, so yes.
Yeah, that's still a pretty young age for this type of doctrine to be put in you, these type of beliefs. What was it like?
So you had your youth groups, and most of the peers that I grew up with, they were at the church with me, and we would have like youth nights and stuff like that. And pretty much we had a youth night like every other Friday, and we were just really pushed to seek after God and to get to know God for ourselves, and like study the Bible and read the Bible and hang out with Christian people and keep yourself, pure, from sexual sins. And that's pretty much what we were pushed to do most of the time there in my youth.
Did you like it? Like, what was your experience like as a kid there?
I I really loved like going to church. Like I really did love it. I remember one time my mom was like, "We're not going to church today," and I remember actually breaking down in tears because I really did have like a passion for it at that time. I loved going to go and like sing, and clap my hands and praise and stuff like that, and even sitting and like hearing a preaching sermon was like, I don't know, it was good to me at the time. Um, so I did like that aspect of it. The aspect I didn't like was a lot of the peers that I grew up with, they were very cliquish. That was one thing that I probably didn't like as much about it.
What do you think was the reason for why there were so many cliques? I mean, everyone was in the same church.
So I think from the teenage standpoint, it was more like just normal teenage stuff. But I did hear like adults adults would talk about like me specifically, or even my brother, and they'll be like, oh, your children, like talking to my mom, and they would say, oh, your children are so, well behaved, or oh, your children, they're so into God, they're so into the Bible. Because the way me and my brother we were technically, especially me, like I said, I was very much into church. And my peers, they were coming to church because their parents birthed them. But like, I was really the one who was like super into it. So I think that's also a part of it, is that the other teenagers might have seen like the adults talking about me and thinking like that I was more in tune with God or something. And that might have played into it also. But I also think it was just teenage stuff too.
Right. I noticed that a lot of these churches that have cult-like characteristics tend to also have a lot of cliques. What age did you end up leaving? I don't want to jump the gun, but I'm just so curious.
So I probably left around, I'm trying to think of the exact age, because it was kind of a transition for me. When I went away to college at 18, that's when like my eyes really opened up to like that there are so many different people out here, and there's so many different religions, and then that they're not all bad, which is what I had kind of been taught, is that they weren't like us, they were different. And so when I went to college, my eyes opened, and that started my transition, but I was still going to church pretty faithfully, still at that time. I didn't fully come out until I was 24.
Okay. So you fully came out at 24. Were you harassed? Did they call you? Did they try to come to your house and try to pull you back in?
No, no, I didn't have any of that. And it was also probably because at that time I wasn't in anybody's like actual church. I was like a church hopper at that time. So I wasn't really like rooted anywhere.
And in this church, you're allowed to hop from church to church as long as it's within the same denomination, the same group.
Exactly.
Okay, I see. So going back to the whole marriage and dating thing, did you date when you were in this church?
I didn't really date except for that one boyfriend I had in high school. And then, like I said, during my transition time, when I got in my 20s, like around 21, 22, I was really starting to phase out of the church at that point. And I was just like, what I did was I waited. I was doing what they told us to do, which is you have to wait for God to send you a husband, and you have to wait for, a good, presentable apostolic man to present himself, which just like never happened. And there's some women in the church who have been waiting, and they're like in their 40s and 50s, and they're still waiting. And I said, I did not want to be like that. And so that's when I just started dating. Like, it didn't matter. Like, I was just dating people that I liked, and it didn't matter if they were apostolic or Christian or whatever.
Did they find out that you were dating people that were not necessarily a part of the same church?
No, because I wasn't really telling anybody what I was doing at the time. My mom is still heavily in that church, and I wasn't really telling her about it. And when she would learn about it, she would be like, oh, they're different. They're just trying to use you, stuff like that. As if like men in the apostolic church don't use women too. So
would you say that a lot of the members tend to believe that their church is the right church, the one true church? If you're not a part of this, then that's it. You're pretty much doomed to hell.
I would say a lot of them do really, truly believe that. Because like I'll use my mom again as an example, and she's been at this church obviously for a long time, since she took us there, and she still is there, and she tells me about different things that she sees in the church that's disturbing to her. But she's like, no other church preaches like our pastor preaches, and nobody else teaches the word like they teach it, and nobody else can get to God like we can get to God. Like, she really truly thinks that like if she goes to another church, it's like her relationship is going to be doomed. Like it's never going to be the same. And I would say most of them actually do believe that, because I believe that until I left. So
When a person is a part of this church, well, how do they become a part of the church? Is there any kind of studies you have to do in order to officially become a member, or anything you have to do?
well, they have what they call Bible studies, but it's just really just okay, you come to Sunday school for one full month and they teach you about the doctrine of being apostolic. And once you get that, like, then you need to be baptized. And then after you get baptized, they do what they call a tarrying service. And some people do it, some people don't. But it's basically where you call on God until you start to speak in another tongue. And then they will say, okay, now you're fully saved now.
So if you don't ever speak in tongues but you were baptized, they don't consider you saved?
Exactly.
Do they have their own belief of the reason why a person might not speak in tongues yet they've already been baptized?
What I've heard growing up is that they'll say, oh, they're not really ready for God yet. They're not really ready to accept Him into their heart, and that's why they don't have the Spirit yet. Or they'll say they're just not receiving it. Like they're ready for it, but they're not receiving it. Like you need to receive it. It's a gift. You don't work for it, you receive it. Some others say, like, I think I just said it, but like they feel like your heart hasn't changed yet. And if your heart doesn't change, then you're not going to get it, because God's not going to come into a dirty place. And that's how they feel about it.
It's always something, and it always seems to be the individual's fault as to why they don't speak in tongues, or why they're still going through depression and anxiety even after being baptized. You're not praying enough. Your
Exactly.
heart is dirty, it's unclean. I've been told all these things. And I'm noticing that like a lot of these churches that are cultish, they share very similar characteristics, like all the things so far that we're learning about the church you were a part of. Very similar in the things that they say, the wording. Did you have any friends in the church that remained friends with you when you left?
Not really. They really don't want to associate with you. And then another thing is that a lot of the people that I was, or that were like in my group or whatever, they ended up leaving the church even before I did. And so at that point, honestly, it's kind of like how I was taught, like, okay, well, I can't be associated with this person anymore because like they're literally quote unquote falling away from the gospel. So I would say it's probably like that for a lot of people.
So if you leave this church, then, or any church that follows this same kind of doctrine, if you leave, basically they'll shun you. They don't believe that they could continue to associate with you.
Like hanging out with you and stuff like that, no. But like Facebooking, I have a lot of them on my Facebook. Quite a lot of them on my Facebook. So like that, they're okay with. But like actually associating with you, they're not really okay with that. Pretty much, they still keep in contact with you in some kind of way. Like I said, Facebook and things like that. So they don't like completely shun you, because they see it as a way like that they can get you back to the gospel. Like if they completely shun you, then they'll say, oh, that's not an act of love, quote unquote. And so they won't do that.
Okay, well, at least they have that, right? I know you said your mom is still in the church. Do you have other family members that are in the church as well?
My brother, off and on, he goes to the church. I think he's dealing with his own kind of like religious conversation, like with himself, because we've talked about it before, and I think that he's kind of where I'm at, but he's still like I have to believe this. So he goes there every now and then, but not all the time.
There's so many different denominations, and
Yeah.
I think that it's good for people to know that there are, even if a church is not necessarily a cult, because, you know, so many people, they hate to use that word. It's like such a taboo to use when you're talking about religion and church. But there are still churches that still can traumatize people. There are churches that still can be spiritually abusive. When you decided to leave, was it a hard decision?
By the point that I chose to leave, it wasn't really hard for me because I had been going through a transition, like a process from 18 to 24. So by the time I just fully decided, like, this is going to be it, it wasn't really hard. It was just kind of like, okay, well, that's what it is.
And did it affect you in any way? How did your membership for so long in this church, how did that affect you when you ended up leaving?
It was different. It was freeing. Like, I felt free that I didn't have to get up every Sunday, and force myself and, just make it in, sis. As long as you just make it in. I just felt like I didn't have to do that anymore. And that was a freeing part. And I do better things on my Sundays now, like walking in nature and stuff like that. And I just felt very free after leaving. I did feel a little, not a lot, but I felt a little fear because I'm like, okay, like, does this mean that, something's going to happen to me now? Because for so long, it was kind of like, if you stay here, then good things will happen for you. And then, like, if you leave, all of a sudden, bad things will happen. Because the preacher, actually, the pastor, he actually told a story to us once over the pulpit. And he said that there was this man that he knew that was like really into church or whatever. And then he started making some money, like good money, and he started leaving church. Well, he said that God told him that God was going to put holes in that man's pocket, right? And then he said he talked to the man, and the man was like, I'm making all this money, but it don't seem like I'm making money. It's like I got holes in my pocket. So after being told things like that, you think, oh my gosh, like if I leave, like my life is going to turn out bad.
That's true. How do they handle people giving tithes? Speaking of money, how do they handle that? What do they believe?
So tithes and offering is an interesting thing because technically, if you look at the New Testament Bible, tithes and offering is not even really in there. It's really a Old Testament thing. But they tell you that, like, you need to do tithes and offering, and tithes are supposed to be like 10% of what you give. And then offering is supposed to be what you give because you just love God so much that you just want to give extra money. So basically, tithes and offering time would happen, and they'll be like, okay, it's time to, give God some money. Like, you should be happy about giving. Like the Bible says that, you should be a happy giver. And if you're not a happy giver, then God doesn't want it. And if you don't want to give money, they say that's a heart issue. Yet again, they say you have a heart problem and, like you need to work on that.
That triggered me so bad just now. Me personally, I was told constantly that I had a heart issue. And when it comes to tithes and offerings, what if a person just were to say, I really wish I could give, but I can't? What would they say about that?
I've actually heard a pastor say over the pulpit at one of the churches, not the church I was raised at, but another one. And he said, like, if you don't have anything to give, then you need to come up here and touch this basket. And we're going to pray that God gives you some money to give next week.
That's so sad.
And that's how they handle you not having any money to give.
That's really, really sad and really pathetic. And it sounds like a church manipulation, a way to scam people. And I completely believe not all churches, because I've been to churches that are not like that, but I've been to so many that make offering and tithes like such a big deal. And realistically, not everyone can afford every single Sunday. to give money, but it's so easy to make someone feel guilty when they can't give. I mean, I've dealt with that guilt of not being able to give, or having but not having enough to give, and then feeling like reluctant to give anyway. I know how that feels, and I believe that way too many churches use this as a way to just manipulate people, just like how they use the Bible and use all these other things, and how these trigger words come up. It's all just manipulation. I've actually been watching some YouTube videos lately about manipulation in the church and how they use the music and the pastor trying to make people fall on the floor and telling them to give money. And basically it's like a certain way that they do this and tie in the music and all the yelling, and they produce so much energy in the atmosphere that causes people to actually believe what they're hearing, because the Holy Spirit is here. I have to give up my money. And I'm not saying that, that the Holy Spirit and people falling to the floor is not real, or speaking in tongues isn't real. But I've been to churches where they would use these techniques, and suddenly people start throwing their wallets around.
I can definitely agree with what you're talking about, because like, I wouldn't say like the Holy Ghost is not like completely real. Like, the point I am in my transition, my process, I'm really not sure, but I believe it's real because I experienced it myself. So I truly do believe that it's real. But I have seen some people do some crazy things when supposedly, they call it drunk in the spirit. I've seen some people like hurt themselves. I've heard about somebody putting a hole in the wall, people hitting other people while they're quote unquote praising, falling on the ground, like twisting their ankles, running, screaming, shouting, running into other people. I've just heard so many different things and seen so many different things that sometimes I do wonder about it.
You mentioned just now that you're in a certain phase in your spirituality. Can you just go into detail exactly where you are now when it comes to your faith?
So where I'm at now is basically like, I still believe in God. Like, I don't think I could ever not believe in God. And not because of what I've been taught, but just because I've seen different things in my life to where I'm like, I just could never say like, I don't believe that he's real. So I do truly still believe in God. I'm just not sure if it's like the same God of like the KJV Bible. Like, that's kind of where I'm at right now. Because I mean, somebody told me something very interesting, and she said that if you take like a piece of glass, right, and you shatter it, there's many different pieces, but it's all the same glass. And she was saying how there's so many religions, they have so many of the same characteristics that you can't, well, she wouldn't say that religion is not, or that God is not real, because God seems to be the main theme of it, but that the pieces are a little bit different, but they're all still pieces of him. So I'm kind of like in that situation right now.
When it comes to religion, do you see religion the same way as you did before while you were growing up in this church, or has your views on that changed?
I can answer that quickly. No. No, I don't at all. Growing up, like I said, like a lot of what we believed was that like we were like truly connected with God, and nobody else was truly connected with God. And when we spoke, or like when we called God, he answered immediately. And like, that's truly what we believed. And so at that point in time, I really thought that it was either this way or nothing else. And I really thought that the church I actually came from was like the best out of like all the apostolic churches. And then other apostolics were underneath us. Like, they were inferior to us. And a lot of people from that church think that way. So it wasn't just me. A lot of us start that way. And so my thinking now is like, I totally don't think like that at all.
Does your family know that your views have changed, have shifted a bit?
Yes. Like, I've told my mom about it before, and we have our conversations. My mom is very older. She's from the 40s. She was born in the 40s. So she's pretty much been, in religion and in Christianity a very long time, about 60 something years now, almost 70 years. She's almost 70 years old. So for her, is like, it's this or nothing else. Like, I feel like for older people, it's hard for them. Like, they can't see anything else. And for younger people, it's easier. But I do have conversations with her. But I mean, we have conversations. She doesn't mind me talking about it, but she doesn't necessarily believe in what I say.
What makes you feel that the God of the universe is not connected to the God that we're taught as Christians in the Bible?
Well, I think that it might be a part of him. And I say that because I hadn't told you this yet, but I'm married to a Muslim. Like, being with him and like hearing some of the things that he tells me about, like even the Quran and stuff like that. And I'm like, that's interesting, because like a lot of the characteristics are like the same. So I think that it might be a part of him, but I'm not even sure if Islam is truly right, or Christianity is right, or Judaism is right, because I've learned about Judaism too. And it just seems like a lot of them, or I just think he's like maybe a part of things. Like, I think like a part of people's thinking is what makes up like who he is. But we can never truly know who he is, because we are just people. You know what I mean? That's one of the things that also makes me like really wonder about religion in itself, because a lot of these people are like, oh, this is who God is. But then they tell you that your human mind cannot figure out God. But then they tell you that this is who he is. So I'm like, well, how do you figure him out if you just told me this is who he is, but you just told me our human mind can't figure out who he is? Like, it doesn't make sense.
But after I had left the ICOC and I started to experience different things and learn about different religions, the way I started to feel was, I felt like God is so much more than what I've always been taught and told. I started to feel at the time like, you know what, I think you could find God in other ways. It doesn't have to be through Christianity. It doesn't have to be through religion and the rules. It doesn't have to be through the Holy Bible. I felt very at peace, and I felt like I found God when I was in nature. And that's when I fell in love with nature. Before, I was always one of those people who's like, nope, I'm not going in nature. All those bugs, all those trees, I don't feel like having bugs around me. But now I'm so in love with nature. I just feel so in tune with myself. I don't know if you saw my recent video where I said that I'm agnostic now. It's still, right. I've had people say, oh, you're atheist, you're atheist. No, it's still very confusing for me, because even though I definitely don't believe in the God of the Bible. I don't believe that if there is a God, I don't believe that is the God. In my personal opinion, he doesn't sound like a great deity. And there's way too many things that don't make sense to me. I don't believe that is the God. I do believe we were created some way, but I'm not sure if our creator has so much power and so much say over everything, just because I look at the world and I'm just like, I don't know, like, what's going on. And I mean, I can't say that I don't think that there is a God at all, which is why I said, you know what, I'm just in the middle. I'm agnostic. I agree with what you said. Like, we don't really know. I think that, in my opinion, so many people, they get so involved in church and they get so involved in religion, and they're so 100% sure that their religion is the right one and their belief is the right belief. And if you don't believe, then there's something wrong with you. Clearly, you're the one who needs help. You're the one who needs to be prayed for. And when I look at other religions, because I have two friends who are Muslim, and when I look at other people's religions, I see how beautiful of a person they are, and their morals and just how they think, but yet they worship an entirely different God. It makes me question. Like, well, where are they going to go if the God of the Bible is real, and if the God of the Bible says believe in me or you're not going to go to heaven, you're going to go to hell. Or where do these other people, all these other religions, where do they go? And, you know, a lot of these people are really good people. They're beautiful people. And it just never made sense. And that was how my transition out of Christianity began. I didn't want to put a label, and I didn't want to have to follow a certain standard of beliefs when I truly didn't inside believe these things I was told I should believe. How is your relationship, since you and your husband are basically interfaith? You have two different belief systems. How does that work out?
So our marriage works out pretty well. Like before we even got married, because I had dated a Muslim before, and my husband was like, you know, we're never going to have religious problems, and like he promised me that. And it's been 3 years now, and we still have not have any relationship problems according to like religion or anything like that.
I love the fact that your husband says that, the fact that he's like, you know what, we love each other, that's it. It has nothing to do with what you believe, what I believe. We're keeping it here. We're keeping the focus on what's important. We love each other. That's important. And I feel like a lot of relationships don't have that, especially when one person ends up leaving the faith and the other person remains. I heard of so many people that they didn't work out because of the fact that they just didn't agree and didn't see things the same, and they consider that unequally yoked. Like my husband, he tells me all the time, we're unequally yoked because in his words, I left God, and he still is 100% a believer. He still practices the faith and the religion and all of that stuff. So I love when I hear that someone is with someone of a whole different religion. Is how deeply rooted in his religion would you say your husband is? Because I know that I've been told that like Muslims are only encouraged to be with other Muslims.
Well, it depends on, well, they say that, you know, Muslim men, they can marry women that they call women of the book, which is like Christian women, which is what they call Christian women, women of the book. So Muslim men can marry like, you know, those type of women, but they do discourage Muslim women from marrying anybody but a Muslim man. So I think that's kind of where that comes from.
Oh, I see. So it's a double standard. So the man could date who he wants, but the woman, it has to be with a Muslim man.
Yes, that's usually how it goes. Now there are a few Muslim women that I've like heard of that, you know, they venture out and they marry somebody who's of another faith, but that doesn't happen usually often because they really don't discourage that.
Right. Okay, I see. Yeah, I'm just really curious about all this. I don't want to go off topic about the church and everything, but I think it is important that people hear about this too, because a lot of the emails I get are people who are in interfaith relationships, and they're not sure how it can work out. I mean, of course, your situation is different because you married your husband after you left the church, right?
Well, technically I was in the process of leaving when I married him. I still wasn't fully out. Like even when we got married, I was still going to church, and he would even drive me to church services, you know, and drop me off in the morning and come pick me up, you know, when it was over, like at 1 or 2.
Right.
So I didn't like fully leave. I mean, I fully left at 24, but I didn't fully leave until like 5 months into my marriage.
And did anyone know that you were dating him?
I got married very quick because I didn't want nobody discouraging me. Particular people that I know would have discouraged me. So like me and my husband, we got married within a month and a half of meeting.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't
So,
blame you.
yeah. So I really, because I knew people would respect that he was my husband, but I knew that a lot of the Christian people that I know, like family and stuff like that, I knew they would not respect him if he was just my boyfriend. And I know even if he was just my fiance, they would like talk down on him and say, you know, you're not supposed to be with him or anything like that. But if he was my husband, I know they would respect that. So that's why I was like, well, if we're going to do this, then let's just do it now. Like if you're serious and I'm serious, then let's just get this done.
Yeah, that's true. You're right, because I have a friend who I've mentioned about her story in a couple of the older videos, that she married someone right away too. She fell in love with this guy. They didn't want her to date him because even though he was coming to the church, he wasn't baptized in the church, so he wasn't considered a member. And she decided to go and marry him like within only, I think only like 2 months of knowing each other. They got married and she didn't say anything to anyone because she didn't want anyone to try to discourage her, and she got a lot of backlash and she got kicked out for a while for it, but no one could really say much because this was now her husband, so it was like the relationship was respected differently. That's one thing I do notice when it comes to cults and when it comes to really, because I don't think that every church that acts like a cult is a cult, but I think that a lot of churches, more than we give credit for, are very, very, very controlling to where they can seem like a cult. And so many of these churches are so controlling that they want to control who's in your life, who do you have relationship with, who are you friends with. But then the churches I've been to that don't do that, the churches I've been to that don't get in your business to that extent, they're very good churches and they run normal. They allow people to live their life, but they have a balance. There has to always be a balance. And it sounds like the church you were a part of and the church I was a part of, there is no balance. It's more like, look, you have to believe in these things and you have to do these things. And if you don't, then you're not one of us. What did it take for a person to be kicked out of the church, let's say, or this fellowship? What would the person have to do? Were there any kind of sins that a person has to commit in order to no longer be a part of this church?
Okay, so the church I came from, they would tell you that they're they're more liberal than other apostolic churches, because other apostolic churches used to do that, like dissociation, or they would sit you down. Like they would tell you, okay, you did a sin. We all know about your sin. Like, okay, you got pregnant out of wedlock or something like that. So you will publicly be sit down. Like you can't do choir, you can't do ushering, like, and everybody knows why this is happening. But the church that I went to, they're like, oh no, we're liberal, you know, we really believe in the love of God and that's not right to do. So they never do that at all. And I don't know, it's kind of crazy because there's been a lot of adulteries at this church, and known adulteries. There was a woman who got pregnant by a man, who got pregnant by the man that goes to the church. Him and his wife both attend the church. Everybody knew that this was his baby. And they still let her sing on the praise team and sing in the choir and praise dance and she even testified about having an affair and that it was a sin, and she asked God for forgiveness, and that, you know, she just wanted to do right by her child. And one time she even praise danced right in front of the man and his wife that she had slept with. And everybody knew they had slept together. And she literally was shaking and jiving right in front of him and his wife. So I would say, like, those kind of things happen at that church and they do nothing about it. And everybody knows about it.
And what does the wife do when they're in that type of situation where their husband's cheated? What does the wife do?
The wife, pretty much, she just tries to deal with it the best that she can. It's really actually a sad situation, because I remember seeing one of the girls I grew up with who's still there, and it's pretty sad, but she was a virgin when she got married and everything, and this man ended up cheating on her after they got married and having a baby with one of the other girls in the church, and everybody knew about it. And I ended up seeing her one day, and she just looked so depressed and so sad. And I mean, they just try to deal with it the best they can, really. That's really kind of what they're told. It's just, forgive him and move on, pretty much.
So if a wife wants to get a divorce because her husband's cheated, they will try to encourage her to stay, or will they respect that decision?
They would encourage her to stay. They would tell her that, like the Bible technically says that you can leave, if you do have like an adultery in the marriage, but they would encourage her to like, work it out, do marriage counseling, pray about it, forgive him, you know.
How about if it's like repeated offense? He won't stop cheating.
So it's really interesting because it was this one woman and her husband was repeatedly cheating on her, and she was just dealing with it, taking him back and forgiving him, trying to work it out. And she did that, I guess, for years. And then finally she got to the point to where she was just done and she ended up divorcing him. And then recently, now I wasn't there, but they videotaped it, so I was able to see it like on Facebook and stuff. But recently, he was there at the church, and the pastor invited him up, and he did a proposal over the pulpit to ask her to be his wife again. And he was like, I messed up, I lost my family, and I'm ready to change and stuff like that. I'm changed man. God has changed me now. And will you take me back? And then they ended up getting married recently. And it was a whole big thing. Like everybody in the church was like, oh my gosh, they're getting back together. God can restore marriages. Can you believe it? So
That
that's
makes
something I do know about one couple that had repeated.
that makes me so angry. It makes me so pissed off because I feel like so many of these churches, like they're so one-sided when it comes to relationships. I feel like the woman is always expected to take it and take it and take it. And
Exactly.
and God is supposed to change your husband, and all you have to do is continue to pray for him. They're just expected to take it and to continue being a great wife and a great mom. And all of that is difficult in itself. And I mean, if a person feels like they no longer want to be married to someone because this person cheated, even if they cheated just once, that's completely understandable. I don't really understand why so many churches or religions feel that it's better to stay married than to get a divorce when something like cheating is involved or even abuse. So how do you feel now that you're no longer a part of this church?
I mean, I feel very freed up from it. I feel good to not be a part of it. I do stay informed about different things, like how you said there are gossips, in the church, and so yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on that they just don't want you to know, but like there's a lot going on.
And you said your mom is still a member, so that the fact that she's still a member doesn't affect your relationship.
No, not really. It only affects it when like when they make when she has to choose, like that's when it really affects the relationship, like because the way that the church is, they have so many events. They like to tie up their people in like the church and doing like things there and only there, because even when I was going there, a regular, well, a regular third week out of every month when I was in high school, it went like this. I had Monday where I had to be there to help babysit these kids for this single mothers group. And then Tuesday was Bible study, Wednesday was nursing home, Thursday was choir, Friday was youth group, and Saturday was your day off. And Sunday you came to church morning and night. So they really like keeping you tied up there. And that's where me and my mom have an issue, because some days I want her to be with me. Like, hey, let's go out for a Sunday night dinner. And she's like, no, I have to be at church service. Like, church service is happening and I have to be there.
What do they think will happen if they don't attend all these different meetings and all the events?
Now, you are not saved. That's what they think. That's what I was taught, and I truly believed it. Like, I truly believe by, throwing myself into church and the ministries and the activities, like, that I was saving my soul, and that I was definitely going to make it to heaven, like, you know what I mean? So that's basically what they tell you, is that, oh, if you don't do this, then, you don't love God, first of all. And second of all, you're not going to make it to heaven. You're going to go to hell.
It's like torture. You have to, that's first of all, that's way too many days to be going to church. You could be doing so many other things. I mean, I understand if you want to go to church on Sunday, but all these other days, that's too much. I mean, then you have your regular real life, and you have your work life and your family life. I could see how that could become aggravating and annoying. It was the same thing in the ICLC. You had to attend all these different things, and if you didn't, they wanted to talk to you. They assumed you were starting to fall away. It got really ridiculous. So now are you still a part of any church in general, or are you just kind of relaxing a little bit?
Pretty much, I'm relaxing. I'm way off of churches right now. Like, I don't see myself ever walking back into a church. I just don't see that happening.
Right.
I don't see myself going back to that life at all.
And what is the reason that you don't see yourself going back?
Because I feel so at peace with where I'm at now. And when I really think about it, when I was there, it was a lot of like, like, if I don't do this right, oh Lord, I need to ask God for forgiveness. And the first lady of the church I was raised at even said that you need to be asking God for forgiveness like every minute of the day, because you might do something wrong. So it was always like, okay, like this minute, okay, did I think something wrong? Did I say something wrong? Did I do something wrong? And I just don't want to go back to that life.
I don't blame you. That's exactly why I didn't want to go back. I mean, that, and just, it was too much trauma for me. It was the thoughts. And I started going to this new church with my husband and kids, and I went there for a few months, and then recently I decided I'm no longer going, because that's just not where I am. And I think that it's good you don't force yourself. If that's not where you are, then it's best that you just don't go. And if you decide to go at some point, then that's your business and that's your right. And if you don't, then that's also your business and your right. And you should never force yourself to be a part of something that you don't feel, because then at that point, we're just faking it. And that was exactly why, even though I like this church a lot that my husband's a part of, and I actually made friends there that I'm still cool with, I stopped going because it just did not align with me and with where I am at this moment. Is there anything else about your experience that you feel is important for people to know? There may be some people out there that may be looking information up and just came across this video. Is there anything else that you want to put out there?
I just want to say, like, definitely just be mindful if you do go into any church, really, and really, like, check it out. Like, because I do understand, like, there are some people that still want to go to church, which is okay. Like, if that's what you want to do, if that's what you feel like you want to do, that's fine. Get to know people and really see if it would be even a good fit for you. And I just wanted to touch on the interfaith marriage, just something real quick. So another thing that I have experienced with the interfaith marriage is that when I told people I was married, like on Facebook, I did the whole, oh, like, here's me and my husband kind of thing, like, here's our picture and stuff like that. And people were shocked because they didn't know that I was even dating or anything like that. But people were congratulating me. But I had one sister in particular that I knew back at that church, and she messaged me, and she's like, hey, sis, I want to celebrate with you, but I just can't celebrate with you unless I know if he's saved or not. And I said, I wrote back, well, he's a Muslim. And she was like, sis, that's not the way, you shouldn't have married him, but you're married now. So, just try to be the best wife that you could be. and I'll pray for you in your situation because I know it's hard to be married to a Muslim. And I was just thinking, like what in the heck? Like, that's crazy to me. And I also had another experience where there was this girl that I knew from the church world, and she had just recently got married, and she saw me, and she's like, "Hey, how you doing?" I'm like, "Good, how are you?" And then she's like, "Hey, are you married?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "I need some married friends." Like, all her friends were single, so she was like, "I need a married friend, and so we should, hook up and have lunch or something." So I'm like, "That's cool." So we exchanged numbers and we started texting and stuff. Well, it came up that my husband was a Muslim, and she never texted me back after that. And I just thought, like, how sad is that? Like, I could have been a good friend to you, and you could have been a good friend to me. But just because he's of another faith, like, you won't even hit me back. So those are two experiences that I just wanted to hit on real quick.
That's really, really messed up. That's messed up on so many levels. First of all, the first situation with the first woman that you mentioned, her calling your marriage a situation just because you're married to a Muslim, like, who the hell do you think you are? I don't even know how she had that much balls to be able to say that out her mouth. I mean, it's just so disrespectful. It's very disrespectful. And the other woman, you're right. She could have been a really good friend, and you could have been a really good friend. You guys could have had built a really great bond. But this is a problem that I have personally with religion, is that so many people are part of religion, and then they use it as a shield and they use it as a weapon at the same time. I can't associate with you because you have a whole different faith from me. Or they use it as a weapon and beat you with it because you have a different faith as they do. And that's the sad part about religion. That's the thing that I think that it wasn't until after I left Christianity I started to really see and notice this. Because, when you're a part of a certain religious group, you don't really see everything that goes on. But then when you leave and you're on the other side, you start to see things.
The whole unequally yoked thing, because you had talked about that, and I've heard about that many times. And something I heard somebody talk about when they were talking about it is that they only use that for religious, like, equally yoked. They never use that for nothing else. Like, they don't talk about, like, if your emotions are equally yoked, or your finances, or the mental state, or anything like that. It's only about the spiritual. Like, if they're the same religion, then you're obviously equally yoked. And I've seen many like marriages who both people are the same people, and they're still going through crap. Like, it doesn't make a difference if you're the same religion. You can still be going through a whole lot of issues because you're not emotionally matched, or you're not I want to say spiritually matched, because there's religion and then there's spiritual. So you're not spiritually matched, or even financially matched. So I just wanted to bring that up about the whole unequally yoked.
And that's why I'm happy that you married a Muslim. So for any Christians out there who don't like it, that's too bad. I'm glad she married a Muslim.
I talk about different things, because the way I see it is, like, so many people are going through the same thing. Like, why are we all going through the same thing? Like, somebody should have a different experience at some point. And so I feel like if we were to, like, talk about it, and maybe, like, if I could help somebody else stay from certain situations so they don't have to go through the same experience, then I would love to do that. So basically, the channel was about just discussing different things like love and, like, religion and sex and things like that, and even buying your first car, just like all kind of things, because there's so many pitfalls in life that if somebody had told me about, like, I wouldn't be, my credit wouldn't be messed up. You know what I mean? Or, like, my money wouldn't be messed up.
It sounds interesting. I'm going to have the link below in the description box for you guys so that you can check out the channel. It is called Beautiful Being, and that will be down below. So check it out and subscribe, give support. That makes like 100% sense. There are so many other ways that you could be matched to the other person, and people make it seem as if it has to be religion is the only thing. And I believe, like you just said, spiritually, that's a different kind of connection than religious kind of spiritual, because I experience spirituality and it's not in the religious way, but my husband doesn't. He experiences just religious spirituality. I'm so happy you put it out there. You said it perfectly, honestly. So, with that being said, just because these people are religious doesn't mean that they are right. So, as you said, be very careful, everyone, with wherever you do decide to go. Thank you so much for being a part of this channel. I'm going to definitely have your YouTube link down below in the description box.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. And this has been a nice talk, too.
We're going to end this, guys. You already know, down below description box, I have the link to my website and my social media. And if you haven't joined my Beautiful Souls group on Facebook, then check it out. If you want to share your story, then shoot me an email, shoot me a DM on social media. The links to all that is down below. I'll see you guys in the next video. Love you all so much. Thanks for joining.
We've been waiting so long.